Herndon.
Okay, good morning. I am Scott Herndon. I'm also running for State Senate District 1. We don't have a lot of time to cover a bunch this morning, so check out my website at herndonforidaho.com. We are putting up pretty much daily videos on that website right on the homepage if you want to see where I stand on all the different topics. I do live in Sagle. I've lived here since 2004. I'm a local home builder, married to my wife Arlene. We have 8 children. Number one priority for me for running for the state senate is to basically be a watchman on the wall for you and your constitutional rights, and also to begin to help the state. We're heading in the right direction with a lot of legislators to exercise state sovereignty so that Idaho can be governed by Idahoans for the benefit of the people that live in Idaho, not managed by what other states want, not managed by what Washington, D.C. wants. Thank you. I hope to earn your vote. Scott Herndon.
How long have you been a registered Republican, and what have you done for the Republican Party? Scott, we're going to start on this end with you.
So I've been a registered Republican since I began to vote, and that was in the 1980s. I remember I wasn't old enough to vote for Ronald Reagan, so I think the first presidential election I voted in was 1988, and I do believe I voted for George H.W. Bush, but that was a long time ago, so my memory is missing. So then I pretty much voted consistently. However, I actually really mostly care about candidates. In other words, so if the candidates are good, even if they're running as a constitutional party candidate or some other candidate, if they're better than the other ones, that's what I look for in my candidates. But I do love the idea of the Republican Party and what it stands for, which is representative government. And so that's one of the things I hope to restore to the state legislature right now. Committee chairs hold stuff up, and we don't get our voice heard. And I think that's one of the things, key things the Republican Party stands for. That's what I hope to restore to the state Senate.
General question. In recently passed school safety legislation by Representative Heather Scott, qualified retired peace officers were authorized to carry their firearms in the K-12 schools and colleges and universities. Do you oppose or approve of this legislation? This way, this way, this way.
Oh, sorry. I know I'm standing back here as a wallflower. Thanks. That's right. So my position in regards to what the legislature should do, we already have the constitutional right to keep and bear arms, and it is good people with weapons that are in the position to thwart bad people with weapons. Right. And I think there should be no place where the Second Amendment is put aside. So there should be no place where there should not be people armed. It's our inalienable right to defend innocent life, and we should not rely on law enforcement to do that, because law enforcement is going to take X number of minutes to get there, and during that time people are harmed. So whatever we can do legislatively to uphold the right to keep and bear arms and not have any target that is off limits to our right to defend innocent life. And I recommend to our people that they get trained to use those weapons, and no one's emotionally ready to kill people, but we have to be emotionally and responsibly ready to defend innocent life against people who do not obey the law.
Exactly. Herndon, at a recent forum, you advocated for the death penalty for women who have had an abortion, fathers who take the woman to get the abortion, or, can you not hear me? Or pay for it as well, as if the woman's mother does the same. How do you reconcile a life for a life if you have any sanctity for life?
Right, so that actually is an incorrect assessment of what was said at the recent forum. But how many people here are pro-life? Okay, how many people here want to abolish abortion? Okay, so what I'm about is the exercise of state sovereignty. Fortunately, the state of Texas a couple years ago put into their Republican Party platform the idea of exercising legislative priority, state sovereignty to abolish abortion. We have it within our power to do so, to outlaw it within the state borders of Idaho. It's in our statute. It's also in our Constitution, the inalienable right to life. So a major priority of Idahoans should be that we could get rid of this scourge in our state. We have the ability to do so. So we need leadership in the state Senate and House that will lead in the direction of abolishing abortion, getting rid of the 1,350 deaths in this state, and we could do it next year. We don't have to wait. So if you vote for me, you're voting for someone who's going to go down there and lead in that effort and deliver that message that we have the sovereign constitutional power to do that today.
Thanks. question is for the commissioner candidates. Questions for state candidates and commissioners. Please tell us in clear language whether you are for or against Scotchman's Peak Wilderness proposal. Let's start down on the end over here with Mr. Herndon. Yes, we'll start with the wallflower.
Okay, the wallflower. So Scotchman Peaks Wilderness is federally controlled land right now. It would become a federal wilderness area. I am absolutely opposed to federal wilderness designation because that completely removes that property from state control for perpetuity. And I don't want to make decisions that are against the Constitution. The idea of the equal footing doctrine is that we should get management of all of the lands that are in the state of Idaho. That's our property. And then Idahoans should manage that land and benefit us economically and also defend us against out of control forest fires. So if we basically turn over this land for perpetuity, we take off the table our ability to acquire management of that land forever. And I'm against that. We need state control, local control to benefit Idahoans.
General question. How did you vote on the $55 million Lake Pend Oreille School District facility levy?
I voted no. Constitutionally, we're mandated in the state of Idaho to fund public education. I previously worked implementing financial systems, including for the Los Angeles County schools. Government actually is very good at spending about twice as much or more as private industry. So when we did our implementation at LACO, Los Angeles County Office of Education, we spent $100 million and took twice as long. I was an independent contractor. Took twice as long as Charles Schwab and other big companies that I've worked for. So what we need is better transparency when we're spending money in these schools. We also need more public involvement. I'll give you one other thing. We can't put these as special elections. We know we're going to need the money for these things. We need to put them on the regular election calendar so that it's not a small special interest that's having a vote in these. We need all of the people to participate, and we need to have these regular election days where we do that. Thank you.
Mr. Herndon, you claim to support sovereignty for the state. What is your position on conventions of states?
Okay, so generally, state sovereignty does not need a convention of states to amend the Constitution. State sovereignty is something we already possess the constitutional power to do. It's in the 10th Amendment. The federal government was given limited powers. The states possess all the rest, and the people possess all the rest. I'm actually against, right now, a constitutional convention because when we designate people to go, we cannot control the agenda. Plus, it is just not necessary in order to accomplish local government and state government in our state. Candy Dale, federal judge, last month said that the IDHW has to allow transgenders to apply to change their birth certificates to their new gender identity. Idaho can just say no to that today. But of course, because we're in this training that whatever the court says we have to do, IDHW is accepting those applications as of last week. Those are the things that we just do now. We don't need an Article 5 convention in order to take back government, constitutional government in our state.
Scott Herndon, your reading of the Constitution seems to be selective when it agrees with your religious views. You are all for it. Otherwise, not so much. Shouldn't it be all or nothing?
That's such a general question, I don't even know how to answer that. I am a born-again Christian. What that's going to mean for government is that I'm actually going to, my perspective will be from that moral perspective. Everybody comes into government with a moral perspective. So if you're an atheist, you're going to come in with an atheist perspective. If you're Muslim, you'll come in with the Muslim perspective. And the nice thing about the First Amendment of the United States Constitution is it doesn't prohibit us from, we don't have to put our Christianity at the door when we enter into government. So that's kind of nice. But our responsibility when we take an oath is an oath we take before God to uphold the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. The other thing about being a Christian is when people disagree with us, then we don't revile them and we don't hate them. We actually treat them politely and respectfully, and we love our neighbor as ourselves, and we patiently work to influence them to what we think is what the actual Constitution says. Thank you.
Pass it down to Jim, please. Scott Herndon. You're
Yes, that would be me.
I'm trying to mix these up. So nobody's dominating the microphone. Your social media has a post indicating that you believe and have stated that abortion is murder. It is also in print on your post that you believe that a woman who has had an abortion is not only guilty of murder, but the penalty for having abortion should be execution. Would you please explain further regarding your post?
Yeah, someone has a reading comprehension problem, and someone's putting that out as false information. So if you read it, it doesn't say that. However, what's good for me is that I actually have, believe it or not, though I've never been elected, have a legislative background related to abortion. I look back in history, and since 1973, when the state of Idaho legalized abortion in statute, not a single state legislature or governor has ever proposed the complete elimination of abortion in our state borders until me. And that was less than 2 years ago. We currently have a ballot initiative circulating. We got 4,000 signatures in North Idaho that would completely ban abortion. So if anybody wants to know what my position is, I actually have a record that shows it. And so when you look at that legislation, in the long run, if we can convince enough Idaho state legislators and the governor to implement that particular type of a statute, that I think is the proper statute for how we should treat abortion in the state. Thank you.
Why did you not participate in the Senate debate on Saturday?
Oh, I looked at that. I mean, real honest, I thought Scott was pretty excited about it last week, and it looked to me like it wasn't going to be a forum that was conducive to getting my message out there. So that's where I stood on it. That's just an honest answer. I went to Bonner's Ferry, spent the morning with the Rotary Club. They raised a bunch of money up there for scholarships. I spent the evening in Sandpoint. The Rotary Club in Sandpoint had a function. I asked them if there were reason that they were both doing functions that day. It was just coincidence, but I did get at the auction dinner that night, I got a really nice bench handcrafted by one of the assessor candidates who's not here today. And so I went out door knocking, and we just spent the day being productive trying to get the message out to potential voters.
Yes, you were addressed, so you get 30-second rebuttal, please.
You bet.
30 seconds. So Lee Lancaster of KYMS Radio, does anybody know him?
Yes.
So Lee put this forum on because he liked the idea of the Lincoln Douglas debates where you can actually get some time to see the difference between candidates. And the only thing I'd like to do is just admonish the other two state Senate candidates that didn't even give Lee notice after they told them, they told KYMS that they were going to be at the forum, but neither of my opponents even offered the courtesy of letting them know ahead of time that they were not going to participate, and Lee put a lot of time into that effort. Thank you.
Hold on, Chip. Danielle?
I would like a rebuttal.
30-second.
The reason why we didn't go is I got no less than a dozen phone calls, several from pastors telling me it was a setup and an ambush. I asked Mr. Herndon who the moderator was. He told me the lady that owned the station. Then he changed it to his best friend. It was a complete setup. I watched the entire video. That's why I did not go. I have never missed a forum in years. It was very difficult for me not to go.
Time.
Can
Rebuttal.
I make a statement here?
We're still in a rebuttal.
Can I rebut?
Okay.
Not a party, too.
Gave it to you. Go
I
ahead.
wasn't invited to the forum, but Lee is a personal friend of mine. He goes to my church sometimes, and I asked him about this very question yesterday. I said, was this a setup? People keep going, it was a setup. He said no one knew the answer or the questions ahead of time, because someone had told me, hey, people know the questions ahead of time. He said nobody knew the questions but me. So I just want to speak for Lee, because I think he's a very sincere man. He's not completely into politics, but he did organize this. So I just wanted to say that, even though I wasn't addressed.
Okay, and the only thing I want to add is that I actually heard that because I used my phone there to track the time, that they said, oh, Scott had the questions and prepared ahead of time. Lee and I know each other, but we hardly ever see each other. But I do want you to note that I've just been called a liar, and Lee Lancaster has been called a liar with no evidence to support the charge. In the Bible, that's violation of the 9th commandment. It's called bearing false witness, and is not presumptive of good behavior. I hope that you will vote for a state senate candidate that actually is going to be honest, transparent, and truthful to you. Thank you.
Do you believe that the Second Amendment was a safeguard against potential government tyranny? This is for everyone. Scott, you got the mic.
Okay, so now I just turned it off, so there it goes. Okay, so if you look at the environment from which the Second Amendment was written, what happened in that time frame? Okay, we had just thrown off King George and the British monarchy. So I think definitely that the founders of the country that wrote the Second Amendment, and if you look at the Federalist Papers, did have in mind that this is not your right, it's not to protect your right against intruders or against people attacking your families. It is also to protect your right to throw off an oppressive government. And they even talked about that in all their founding writings. So I think there is that. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. I think we need to just vote, and we need to participate in the elective process, and we need to get elected to school boards and show up and do all the things that we can do there, and that's how we turn around our government.
As far as a setup deal, I'm all about that. There's a guy that anybody that's in the military has heard of, that's certainly a hero of mine, named Chesty Puller. He was completely surrounded on all sides, and our president at that time said it cost too much to go get him. Oh, no. But it's the American spirit that he said, men, we got them where we want to. We can attack in any direction now. Oh. So never be afraid of a setup or being surrounded. It's what's within you that guides you.
Please weigh in. People are encouraging Democrats to register temporarily as a Republican to affect the primary. How do you feel about this? We're starting with Heather.
Yeah, my recommendation is just that. I think it is an ethical situation. If we're Republicans, then we want to, through the primary process, nominate our candidates for the general election. And if the Democrats, so we want Republicans to do that, true Republicans. And if the Democrats want to be more competitive in the general election, then they need to, as a party, come up with better ideas that meet the desires of the people and fit within the Constitution, and then they too can be competitive. There are plenty of other states where they are.
Go ahead and hold that. Final question. To all candidates, why should I vote for you over your competitors?
So I have what you want when you send down a state legislator is you want someone who's actually going to stand up against special interests, against a direction that you do not want to go, that could be against the Constitution, could cost you more money. And I have a personal background, a personal history where I've stood up for my own rights it was for the Constitution and against oppressive government. So if you look at my personal background, you'll see that I'm the only candidate I think that has sued Bonner County, for example, for violation of the First Amendment. I did it not on behalf of me, but on behalf of all the chaplains who came after me who could not exercise their First Amendment right had I not sued. I've also stood up against the oppressive CPS regime in the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, who every day violates the 4th and 14th Amendment rights of families in North Idaho when they try to get in the door of their homes. So that's what you'll get from me.